Madam Ambassador, there was an assassination attempt against one of the leading presidential candidates, Heidi Tagliavini, is the legendary human rights activist. And he was wounded and hospitalized, and he stayed in the hospital for some 5 days, and actually he wasn't able to go outside to meet his constituency and talk to them, explain his programs, and he was actually running his campaign from the hospital through television and radio interviews. My question is this, and also he had the right to ask the Constitutional Court to postpone the elections for at least 2 weeks, but he didn't do that. So what's your opinion? Was there how this case was handled by the government, by authorities? Did you see any pressure from the government? And also, the second question about this, what was the impact on the entire pre-election process, please?
Well, let me first say that this incident is, of course, highly regrettable, and I really wish the candidate good recovery, because it is, of course, terrible. Any attack on a person in this way is has an impact, a terrible impact. But let me say that we have also reacted quite quickly. The ODIHR director has immediately stated his concern about this incident and requested the authorities to investigate the case. So far, we know that the authorities are investigating the crime. And we also, in this press release, the director expressed his hope that this incident will not impact on the campaign. The candidate had the possibility within 5 days to request the Constitutional Court to postpone the election for 2 weeks. He has on 5th February decided not to do so. But we know also that there is again consideration. So
he's back to the hospital now.
He's back to the hospital, exactly, and that the case may be opened again. So in this situation, it's extremely difficult to make any statement that would be valid. It would be just speculation. But we wish him good recovery.
But do you think that the case was handled properly so far?
The candidate had the possibility to appeal. He decided not to appeal. The crime is investigated. Of course, we hope that this investigated. We know already that some results have come out of this investigation. But more than that, I can't say on that.
Madam Ambassador, how do you evaluate pre-election situation after your first interim report? You were hoping that the government will not use administrative resources during the presidential campaign. Did you get complaints from the candidates about this issue? You have also now the second interim report, yes?
Exactly. I was about to refer to the second interim report, which has already many more observations of our 24 long-term observers which are in the field. They are deployed throughout Armenia to observe how the preparation for the elections are going in the countryside. And from their reports, we hear, of course, about the use of administrative sources, and our finding so far was that the distinction between between campaign activity and state functions appears to be blurred. And we give a number of examples, such as governors taking leave, it's a formal leave to campaign in favor of the incumbent, teachers that are told to attend rallies, meetings, campaign meetings, and so on. We have talked, of course, to all the candidates, and several candidates have mentioned a number of allegations, let's put it that way. So far, the allegations are about voter list deficiencies that still are an issue, the allegation about misuse of administrative resources, and then also a sort of a general lack of trust in the integrity of the electoral process.
Madam Ambassador, the presidential team has already issued a statement in response to your second interim report, in which you cite long-term observers, according to which incumbents allegedly are using campaign offices located in the public and government buildings. The presidential team, however, says that these buildings mentioned in your report are not public property or belong to the local governments. They were actually rented from the third party. What would you say? And they're also suggesting meeting with you, discussing case by case. What's your
Let me first
reaction?
say, have a first sort of general remark. In our observations and in our reports, we do not invent. We do not just go and look and say, aha, this is like this. We go and we talk. We talk to people. We talk to election-related interlocutors. And we look on the spot where is a campaign building located. So we base our findings on what we are told. Now, we have, of course, also seen the comments made on our interim report, but I can tell you that we are already having meetings with the relevant bodies, with the campaign offices, as to clarify this indeed. But once more, our observations are based on what we are told. If facts turn out to be otherwise, we would, of course, accept it. But so far, our findings have been verified several times.
And there is this kind of working group set up by the presidential administration and to address shortcomings of the previous elections. What happened to the group? Do you have any report on that? So are they really working, fixing things?
Well, let me say, first of all, that all this happened, of course, before my arrival to Armenia. I have not been part of the past election observation mission, which observed the parliamentary election. But I know that there has been a working group set up by a presidential decree. This working group has worked throughout summer and came up with a kind of an action plan, which was sent to our headquarters, to the ODIHR office in Warsaw. And it was in October, very close to the next presidential election. And that's the reason why our office in Warsaw, while assessing that it was a laudable effort to have a working group working on recommendations, also advised rather not to change any provision with regard to the electoral law so close to the next election. And it is also sort of a Venice Commission reaction, a Venice Commission comment, which says the practice actually requires that such changes be made a year before election, at least 1 year before a coming election. So the idea now would be that when the presidential election is over, ODIHR will come up with a final report, which will also have recommendations, after which ODIHR is ready to come back to Armenia and to discuss
to combine
all these different recommendations, but in an inclusive process in which all stakeholders, election-related bodies, parties, civil society, are part of the process.
Madam Ambassador, what are your main observations so far? I'm speaking in general. You had your first interim report, the second report. What would you recommend at this stage of the election campaign?
Let me say that, and you must know that as you follow elections since a long time, at this stage we don't recommend. We try not even to assess too much, because assessments and recommendations is for the period after the election. But so far what we can say, and those who have seen the second interim report have seen this, we observe this campaign as being rather low-key in the sense that it is not a highly exciting event throughout the city, of a low visibility, rather a low visibility. We, of course, noted the blurred distinction between the campaign activities and the state functions, with the leave of state officials, with what I mentioned already, with the compelling teachers, students, medical staff to attend events and so on. But I would like to underline that, for example, the election administration preparations are going ahead according to schedule. We know that all the 1988 precinct election commissions have been formed. We know that trainings are being given for the PEC members, and our long-term observers assess these trainings as positive, and the Central Election Commission is working in an open and a transparent manner. So again, we have also noticed that, for example, this allegation about voter lists deficiencies, we are in constant contact with the Passport and Visa Department and the police on improvement of the voters list, and so far we see that there has been an effort to raise the citizens' awareness of the fact that they can actually verify their names, their addresses, and they can verify the data which is in the voter list. And also, as we say, as you know, we also monitor, of course, several media, such as 6 television channels, 2 radio channels, 3 newspapers, and 2 online media. And so far we see that there is actually, that all candidates have been covered regularly. We note, of course, that the incumbent and Rafi Hovhannisyan, for example, are covered more. That may have to do with the fact that they are campaigning more
very
actively than other candidates.
There are party structures all over. And, yes.
And of course, we also noted the fact that candidate Parvir Hayrikian, as a consequence of his the attack on him, has been covered more extensively, but this has to do with the particular situation. So that's sort of the main.
Madam Ambassador, yesterday the President was referring to the fact that there is no, excitement, and he says that's a good thing, and he is like saying that it's good when everything is quiet. In some sense, I would agree with him, because in the European countries, it's like non-event. When there's an election, people don't care that much, as opposed to our countries here, former Soviet republics. It's a big event. But he was like trying to hint that the lack of excitement is a good thing, not a bad thing. What's your...
Well, I would like in that case to refer to again our qualification in our interim report too, where we say the campaign so far was low-key and of limited visibility, and this is with no positive or negative sign. I think it is just what we can find. If you come as a citizen to this country, as a foreign citizen to this country, and you look around, you don't automatically see demonstrations all over. With that, again, we don't want to say that this is good or bad. But low-key is actually, it means it is, everything is going in a way that preparations are on the way, but not in a very visible way. It's exactly what
so it's not necessarily negative or positive, findings.
Yeah, certainly not negative.
It's a constatation of the fact.
It is a qualification as it is, as we assess it.
Madam Ambassador, you were the head of the OSCE ODIHR Observation Mission in Russia, and you had pretty tough findings there. And I remember also you from that elections from that period. It was 2011.
And 2012, I was also in the presidential.
Exactly, yes. And do you see any difference between these two countries, between these two missions you were observing there and here? And perhaps maybe you can put this into the context of former Soviet republics. What's your say on this?
Well, let me first say that I would really not like to compare any election, not even in Armenia, a previous election with the next election. An election is always an event in itself. Now, if you take two countries like Russia and Armenia, the sheer size of Russia makes it a totally different situation, of course, with different a different history, different political system maybe. But the thing is not only in that matter. Every country has its own electoral law system, how to regulate the election. For example, Armenia has an electoral code, which is actually a recommendable thing to have an electoral code. Many countries do not have one code, but have many different laws, makes it a bit more difficult to find your way through. So already from that point of view, it's very difficult to compare elections.
So we have the code, they don't have the code.
Well, every country has also some reasons why they have one system rather than another system. And again, it's not a qualification, but it makes it very difficult to compare. So let me say that I would actually rather refrain from comparing.
And the philosophical question, do you think these observation missions are a useful exercise? As a diplomat, as a citizen of European Union, what's your take? Just taking aside that you are head of this mission, what's your
Well, let me first clarify one thing. I am a Swiss citizen, and unfortunately for myself, we are not member of the European Union.
Exactly, yes. I'm sorry for it.
As a Swiss citizen and as a citizen, I think of an old and confirmed democracy. I am really a fervent adherent of election observation mission. I think every country in the OSCE, sort of among the OSCE states, should have election observation mission, and I'm very glad that we have more and more election observation mission also in the so-called Western European countries. My country, Switzerland, for example, had an election observation mission in 2011, and I can tell you the reaction of our population was, why should we have an election observation mission? We have perfect elections. Yeah. Nobody has any mistrust in the electoral system. But it was an excellent opportunity to show to some of the interlocutors in Switzerland that every country has a need of improvement of the democracy. What was the problem in Switzerland? In Switzerland, parties do not have to disclose their finances for the campaign. And indeed, there is one party in Switzerland who seems to use quite a lot of money for a policy which is not supported by many people. It's a bit racist, it is anti-immigrant, it is rather on the right side, not very progressive. So people were very happy that the recommendation came from ODIHR, please disclose your campaign finances. So that's, I think, that's the explanation. I am really in favor. You don't build a democracy in one day, but this is one element that can actually increase confidence of people in an electoral process.
And as a follow-up question, Madam Ambassador, there is also one very important question related to this that is causing sometimes confusion. Some people believe that you are here to give a final verdict to the election results, and with your conclusion to say whether elected official, in this case president, is legitimate or not. So based on this assumption, sometimes you would hear criticism addressed to the OSCE ODIHR that you are like shying away from saying, whether these elections were good elections, whether the elected official is legitimate or not. What's your answer to this criticism?
Luckily, we are not a tribunal. We are a very technical organization, I would say, in that sense. There are the so-called Copenhagen commitments, international standards. There is the legal framework in every country. And we only measure whether these standards have been reached. And this is actually quite technical. We assess compliance. So we don't really come up with a political statement which would be legitimizing elections. That's up to the country to assess whether the elections were legitimate or not legitimate. We are just providing the framework or the analysis and the assessment of what we see in an election. So it would be too much to expect from ODIHR to come up with a verdict legitimizing. And it would also make our task much more difficult because, of course, countries would think twice whether to invite us if we are not legitimizing certain elections. So we actually do a technical job.
And final question, your first time in Armenia?
No. I think I was here in quite important times. My first time was sometimes in 1975, 76. I was a student and a tourist guide with Swiss tourists through the Soviet Union. Yes, yeah. And I came also to Armenia. And then the second time was an important time. I think Switzerland was the country which very quickly recognized Armenia. And I was then number 2 in the Swiss embassy in Moscow. And with my ambassador, we recommended to our government to immediately take up diplomatic relations. So I came here in January, beginning of January 1992. We took up diplomatic relations with then Foreign Minister Rafi Hovhannisyan and President Levon Ter-Petrosyan. So the history is, but since then, I must say, I haven't been very often to Armenia, and it's a very interesting period to be in a country when a country has elections.
Thank you very much, Madam Ambassador. Thank you for the interview.
Thank you for calling us.